Welcome back. We are continuing to talk about the Reformation. We're going to see that Christ-minded people in Europe will grow weary of constant religious strife and bloodshed. In the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, many people now saw another option. And so they moved away from following the Pope. But what other options were there? Well, Protestantism was growing, but it was not monolithic. In other words, unlike the Catholic Church, which had the power to force conformity, the Protestant Church was often ill-defined as a church entity. This led to factionalism, and some choose to embrace creedalism. Creedalism is any system, doctrine, or formula of belief, of religious belief, such as a denomination. This is where we begin to see the rise of the Protestant Church and denominationalism. Denominationalism is different named varieties of professed Christian Protestant identity. And it will really be when we get to America that we see denominationalism explode in growth as it is fueled by the Jeffersonian spirit of independence. People are going to come to the New World and they feel free to organize themselves, and they feel like they have the liberty to organize in any way they want, maybe under a charismatic leader, or align with a particular variant of Christian interpretation. But of course, creedalism became a divisive issue. After all, which creed do you want to follow? And this resulted in a splintering effect, and thus the denominational dilemma of fractured fellowships. While I want to be sure to point out the positive efforts of the Reformation, we need to also point out the problems of the Reformation movement. It started the journey back to the Bible, but it didn't go far enough. Just here, let's give another historical peg. Of historical note is the occasion when Henry VIII, King of England, wanted an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. But the Catholic Church rejected his attempts. Well, he responded by forming his own English church, which came to be known as Anglicanism in 1534, also known as the Church of England. Now, in the United States, it's going to develop into the Episcopal Church. So the American Episcopal Church corresponds to the Church of England or the Anglican Church in the United Kingdom. Now, some other key happenings regarding the growth of Protestant denominations include the development of the Anabaptists Movement in 1520, Lutheranism in 1550. Again, in 1534, just to mention again, that's when Henry VIII and the beginnings of the Church of England. Now, in 1545 to 1563, again, 1545 to 1563, we have the Council of Trent. This is another one of those Catholic councils, one of those ecumenical councils, and interestingly, it was convened as a formal reply to the doctrinal challenges of the Protestant Reformation. It served to define Catholic doctrine and made sweeping decrees on self-reform, helping to revitalize the Roman Catholic Church in the face of Protestant expansion. So this was a Catholic counter-Reformation movement. And good for you to know about. The Council of Trent is often associated with this counter-Reformation movement by the Roman Catholic Church. All right, again, I'm just highlighting some historical events, some things for you to hear and know at least something about. I'm mentioning them. We're not talking at length about each of these, but I'm just sharing with you how, as these years go by, we have rapid change and rapid advancement and expansion of Protestantism and its different facets. We also have in 1650 Quakerism, founded by George Fox. In 1703, Methodism, so often associated with John Wesley. So I've mentioned a bundle of people and events. It's a busy time. Now, let me tell you about some significant advancements regarding translation and transmission work related to Bible distribution. I think it's good to spend a few minutes just making you aware of some of these things. William Tyndale. William Tyndale was a priest and Oxford scholar. He translates the New Testament from Greek into English in 1525. But he cannot get approval to publish it in England. It's an English translation, but he can't publish it there. So he actually moves to Germany and he prints the Bibles there, and then he smuggles them into England, many times in sacks of corn and flour hidden. Tyndale's Bible is produced, it becomes wildly popular, and Tyndale's translation really sets the standard for English translation for 500 years. If you remember what happened to Wycliffe, then you know the work of translation is a volatile issue. And the Catholic Church continues to bring every means at their disposal to suppress the activity. In AD 1536, Tyndale is strangled and burned at the stake. His final words are, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." Tyndale is called the father of the English Bible because his translation forms the basis of the King James Version. Much of the style and vocabulary we know as Biblical English is traceable to his work. In fact, just about all modern English translations are 90% Tyndale tradition. Now, another significant translation work is the Coverdale Bible. It's translated by Miles Coverdale in 1535. It's dedicated to Anne Boleyn, one of King Henry VIII's wives. And this is the first complete Bible to be printed in English. The first printed English Bible, 1535, the Coverdale Bible. There is, unfortunately, a lot of violence during these years. As we have seen, those in power will do just about anything to keep power, and religious control is another manifestation of pride. England's Queen Mary bans Protestant translations of the English Bible. John Rogers, Thomas Cranmer are burned at the stake. And later, some 300 men, women, and children are also burned. This earns Mary the nickname Bloody Mary, and it was thanks to her persecution of Protestants that she was given that name. She burned at the stake Protestant believers in the hundreds. She was a Catholic monarch, but she was succeeded on the throne by a Protestant queen, and this is in England, in a country that remained Protestant. Now, we do have James I of England, and he's going to sanction a new English translation, and this will be called the King James Version of 1611, and it will be the most popular version of the Bible for 400 years. King James I of England commissions 54 scholars. This is a committee translation work. Before, we've seen translation projects, often the passion of a single scholar. But what's interesting here is we have King James organizing scholars, 54 of them, and he tasks them with undertaking a new Bible translation. And they work collaboratively to produce what's called the King James Version. And it is highly influential. I have my copy of a replica. This is a 400th anniversary edition of the 1611 King James Bible. And the spellings are a little different than modern English. It's Elizabethan English. But the King James Version sets the standard, is the gold standard for translation for a long time. Now, we're thankful today we have access to a lot of, many of them very good modern English translations that are written in English that is appropriate to the current state or condition of the language. But I want us to acknowledge our indebtedness. So we may not use the King James Version so much today because of what we would call some of its archaic language. But its significance in church history is indisputable. It stands as a monument to a wonderful translation work that was influential and guiding for millions of Christians. And when King James commissioned it, those 54 scholars worked for 6 years, and they divided up into 6 different teams. And one of the great things of this is the management of it as a translation project, and the organization and the administrative rigor and the care that was put into this effort. And these scholars were using the Textus Receptus, the received text. We think of Erasmus and his work in compiling that. Now, so the Textus Receptus, the Bishop's Bible, Tyndale's Bible. So we have a complete new version in 1611. And the King James Version is also called the Authorized Version, even though really King James never gave the finished version his royal approval. It uses the best known manuscripts available at the time, and it is revised several times. So even when you get a copy of the King James Version today, it's not going to be the 1611 edition. It's going to be one of those later editions from the 1700s. Now also, continuing to think, stay with me as we talk a little bit more about translation and transmission of the biblical text. I want to just make you aware that we have some amazing discoveries during this time period of ancient Bible manuscripts. The discovery of ancient manuscripts of the Bible and the discovery of this body of material is really going to enhance and help our fine-tuning of the accuracy of our English translations. Again, as interest in the Bible grows, thanks to the Protestant emphasis on biblical authority, then between 1629 and really 1947, we're going to have several of the earliest known copies of the Bible are found. They're discovered. Some are found in ancient museums, unearthed. Some are discovered in ancient monasteries that have been protected in their library for so long. We have, for example, Codex Alexandrinus, a copy of the New Testament from AD 400. Today it is in the British Library. If you visit, you go into the British Library and you make an immediate left, and they have a room. It's a guarded room. They keep the lights dark because there in a glass case you can look at Codex Alexandrinus, and it's remarkable, and Cyanaticus. Vaticanus, those are the top three, Cyanaticus, Alexandrinus, and Vaticanus. Vaticanus, as you might be able to deduce, is in the Vatican in Rome. Well, Alexandrinus is perhaps the best copy of of the complete New Testament. It is made available to Western scholars in 1629. And the King James edition used today is last revised in 1769. However, it does not make use of any of those recently discovered manuscripts, including Codex Alexandrinus. Well, the KJV, King James Version, is the most popular Bible for more than 300 years. I guess, our time just doesn't allow us. I wish we could talk more about Codex Cyanaticus. It's the earliest complete copy of the New Testament, copied in, we think, 350. It's found in St. Catherine's Monastery near Mount Sinai. It's discovered in 1859. I wish we had time to talk about the interesting story of the German Bible scholar Tischendorf and his discovery of the manuscript in Egypt and how he smuggled it out of Egypt. He stole it. All right, well, by the 18th century, Christian Europe had really become exhausted from conflict, religious fighting. They had wearied of this unceasing religious strife and bloodshed. Much violence is done in the name of religion. And so the attention of so many turned to the New World as this option to escape some of the mess that they perceive happening in Europe. And so the New World of America gave fresh opportunities for religious freedom. A great many made the trip across the Atlantic. The Puritans established settlements, began to emphasize the preaching of the Bible and holy living. At this point in our study of church history, we're going to shift our focus from happenings in Europe to what's happening in America. And so for the rest of the class, we will focus on evangelistic revival and the growth of Christianity in the United States. With just a couple of exceptions, when we will come back and mention some of the other things that happened in England and Germany. But because really, at this point, our focus will be on American church history. And the truly remarkable thing is that the fruit of Bible preaching began to be seen through mass revival in New England, in the northeast of the United States. And so we're going to take careful note of this revival movement and the growth of what will come to be known as evangelicalism. Now, the Reformation is a movement of the head, heart, and the ear. That is the preaching of an evangelistic message. The Reformation, a movement of the ear, that is listening to the preaching of the gospel. And that's where revival focus will be. Here is where we see the seeds of evangelicalism. And we're going to have an event we call the Great Awakening. We'll see powerful evangelistic preaching from ministers like Jonathan Edwards, John Wesley, and George Whitefield. But for now, at this point, we will conclude our session.